Good morning, lady and gentlemen. Welcome to our concrete coffee talk sponsored by EDYSTON. The purpose of this shtick and this spiel, live events that focus on concrete corrosion and how to rejuvenate damaged concrete. Concrete is one of the most popular construction materials throughout time. And despite the widespread use, we still have a manifold of issues. And the redheaded stepchild of the concrete industry is that deteriorated concrete. It's concrete structures like this that are made up of columns and spans, precast, cast in place, a whole bunch of steel, and a whole bunch of people work together to make what you see in front of you happen. And the unfortunate reality, whether it's by design or just from the ambient environment and its use, concrete has a tendency of not lasting more than 66 to 75% of its design life. And the maintenance costs associated with concrete deterioration and corrosion equals a lot of freaking money. What was it, back in 2014, 2016 timeframe? There was a wonderful paper written on the debt that we have for concrete. And it turns out we put in our US nation for bridges and water reclamation puts about $48 billion of concrete, new concrete every year. And that's just one small side of our concrete sector. Of that, $8.3 billion is also put back into that sector every year to deal with the maintenance associated with concrete physical and chemical attack. And that is that harsh reality that I talked about. And the reality that we have to deal with is even our American Association of Civil Engineers have told us that our infrastructure, I think now we're at a D+ rating because some bridges and dams have failed within the last year or so. So we used to be at a D+. I believe we're at a C- now, but that part of that reality that I keep mentioning is that our concrete infrastructure would not pass or would not graduate from a civil engineering college or a construction management school. And we just don't have the material and resources to replace all of that stuff tomorrow if we were just looking at bridges and water reclamation. But also the other piece of it is that failure is not a freaking option, because when our shit fails, people die. I don't care what bridges you look at, what dams you look at. If somebody doesn't die, then we were lucky. And the problem is that there's bad luck as well as good luck, and that's when skill meets opportunity. And when a bridge fails, when a dam fails, when a column fails, the skill's out the window and the opportunity for mayhem and catastrophic failure is presented. Those are the numbers that I was talking about before. And there's a lot of opportunity for this. What we have to do, though, is look outside the proverbial box and look at other options for, mending or rejuvenating that redhead stepchild of the concrete industry. And the great thing about it is we know what it is. We know where our problems find their root, and that root cause is the molecular makeup of the concrete binder, that superhero of concrete strength, the hydrated cementitious matrix. And what we know about concrete, and let's not get too technical, even though this picture is flipping awesome, but we know that the binding matrix of concrete is a hardened sponge. And over time, through wetting and drying cycles and the contaminant that moisture brings, the cracks, the connection between pores and cracks, or the percolation exacerbates. And what we need to do is find a way not to put a Band-Aid over this damaged concrete, because as we have found through history, more recent than we care to admit, is that when we put a Band-Aid over concrete problems, it might take time, but it's going to show its ugly face. And again, the Surfside condos is a perfect example of when you put a paint or an epoxy or a Band-Aid over a concrete issue, that concrete issue only gets worse and it shows its ugly head 2 o'clock in the morning on a Friday or a Sunday. So with this and the failures that we've had to deal with the death of concrete in many locations, we know what concrete looks like when it's going through that failure mechanisms, from the early stages of failure that you can see at Denver International Airport to some of this bridge structure or infrastructure failure that you see off of the coast of Anna Maria in Florida. And it's a very simple process. Crack in concrete, water and salt migrate into concrete, concrete corrosion leads to steel, steel corrodes, holy shit, the bridge fails. The Portland Cement Association accounts that the number one cause for concrete infrastructure failure in the US is corrosion of our reinforcing steel. With the hydrogel technology that we're focusing on, we use the things that would be an obstacle, the things that would cause the concrete to corrode and deteriorate, as our building blocks for something called a hydrogel technology. And basically what we've got is this nanotechnology. Well, first we clean the concrete. You have a nanotechnology, this concept that uses the building blocks within our cementitious porous solution. And we develop first what is called a immature hydrogel. It's a gel that uses cement porous solution to create a gel that bridges the cracks and the pores and the percolation within our concrete, until the point that we build up that same backbone of concrete strength that calcium silicate hydrate in this illustration just takes you through the 4 stages of that process through time. And ultimately what we're looking for is that rejuvenation of the damaged and deteriorated concrete. So what we've got here, Patchouli will have to say, oh, there it goes. So we've got this animation of our porous solution. We spray the technology on, it seeps in, and our polymerization process starts for an immature gel. It turns into that mature gel, which is that calcium silicate hydrate, which creates a stronger and more durable concrete, which again, we want to get that 30 to 50% life out of it. And we do that by creating that colloidal silica, that nanotechnology-based hydrogel in our hardened sponge of our concrete matrix. So with that, we get that increase in life. And ultimately what we're doing is we're creating a concrete environment that is not going to accept that moisture, those salts, those contaminants, that's going to exacerbate our corrosion mechanisms. Okay, so any questions or anything that I missed or that I could go over in a little bit more detail, folks?
John, I had a question. Is this just an application once the concrete's damaged, or is there a precursor that you can put on like a vertical curing compound that would help the system prior to damage?
So prior to damage, you're always welcome to put a Band-Aid. They call them sealers and healers, but they're paints or epoxies. And anytime you create a barrier between the concrete and all the other contaminants, you're kosher. You're creating something that is more susceptible, more resilient to the wetting and drying and the salts and blah, blah, blah. Especially in parking garages too. That's what we see here, with parking garages. I mean, you want to talk about salts, vibrations, abrasive wear, wetting and drying cycles. So anytime you can put a barrier, you're doing great. The problem is that oftentimes we don't get a barrier on until the concrete has already aged and the concrete has already some contaminants in there. And in that case, it's like having a wound or some type of herpes. Like if you want to put a Band-Aid on it, you wouldn't put a Band-Aid on a festering wound without cleaning it and putting some type of antibiotic. So this nanotechnology that eventually forms the hydrogel is basically the concrete antibiotic. Go ahead and put your Band-Aids on, but don't be silly that you're not going to clean the wound and put that antibiotic on before you put the Band-Aid on. Matt, did you want to jump in there?
Well, I think just back to Mike's question, yeah, I think there's definitely an opportunity in there to put the EDYSTON to work before you get to the point of like, you've got one of those pictures we saw where There's
Sure.
visible corroded steel, spalt concrete, all that perhaps maybe part of some form of a maintenance program. I would lean on John as far as when to begin, how far down the road, or the cost effectiveness, or just any of that information. But I mean, I would think that getting ahead of it would be the way to go, because you're going to have cracks the day of, the week of, the month after you pour the concrete. You may or may not be able to see them, but that's where this stuff works.
Right, and Mike, as it turns out, that this type of technology, the hydrogel, the EDYSTON, the way it works is the more cracked up your concrete is, the more it's going to accept the technology. So if you have a fairly, like Matt said, a fairly new concrete, but it's still, say it's a precast concrete, it's a precast rain screen, or it's a precast I-beam, or some type of section that's going to be used in the bridge. When it gets transported, there is going to be some dynamics that might lead to cracking, especially if the concrete is young, or if it already had some micro cracks from the curing process or the post tensioning, or what have you. So, the picture on the left, this concrete is not that old. I mean, we're talking a year and a half old, and we're already starting to see that bleeding of the ASR gel from those Isle of Man cracks. A year or two old, to me, is still a puppy when it comes to concrete. But based on the deterioration, I would start, as Matt said, using this in a maintenance program. And that's something we're doing with the Indiana Department of Transportation. We're looking at the EDYSTON as part of their maintenance program when they fiber wrap their bridges or their columns with that, what is it called? Carbon fiber wrap with epoxy.
Yep, you got it.
And they clean, they apply this stuff, they allow it to cure anywhere between 3 hours and 24 hours, depending where they are in the workday. And then they put the carbon fiber wrap, where they're going to put the carbon fiber wrap on there. Does that answer your question, Mr. Eads?
Yes, sir. Appreciate the clarification.
Sure. And I tried to illustrate, we're getting an animation built up for this to go through the damage cycle of concrete corrosion of reinforcing steel. But, one of the concrete tunnels, we're working on this concrete tunnel in Auburn, and the concrete is falling off the ceiling, Mike. Like, when I say the concrete is it's like falling off the ceiling in large chunks. And they're already going to demo. And what we did is we came out there. It's a 400-foot long tunnel with 7 full construction joints. And at the construction joints, we're seeing a lot of not just water dripping through, but salts. And the problem is they have no flashing. When they built this tunnel back in 2002, our standards did not call for flashing over construction joints with concrete construction. Now they do, especially in Indiana. We have a lot of soil over it. But we had a lot of water coming through. We applied the EDYSTON that day. The day we came out there, we pressure washed both sides of the joints. And this is a 16 by 16 foot tunnel that goes 400 feet long. We pressure washed the joints, and then we sprayed the EDYSTON on there. Within 24 hours, and I'll send you pictures of this, the water stopped leaking from the joint. And please bear in mind, this is not something that's going to be used to replace an epoxy or a sealer. This is still a breathable concrete. Sammy, say hi to everybody. Hi. But what's happening is the technology is using that alkaline water to create that hydrogel, and now it's starting to build the backbone of concrete strength and reduction in permeability.